Today we had the first meeting of the Apex Monitoring Authority for the National Industrial Corridor Development and Implementation Trust. I thank my colleague Shri Piyush Goyal ji, Shri Ashwini Vaishnav ji, Dr. Suman Berry, Chief Ministers of various states, industry ministers of various states, and all the officials who participated in this morning's discussion. It is the first meeting, it is the first monitoring at this level. So obviously we are catching up with very many things which have happened all these years in different states. So I begin by thanking all the state chief ministers and the state's industry ministers who have actually ensured that the work gets done in the ground and take all the necessary legislative and administrative steps in order that this linking of the country in a better way, creating industrial corridors and making sure that economic activity optimally utilizes all the resources which are being given both by the center and the states. So let me start by saying first that all these 4-5 years we've seen hectic activity happening in these areas. What started with about 3 to 4 states and with some few nodes, today has gone to cover 18 states, and the ecosystem for industrial development activity in the country has taken a different color and speed. A different color in the sense of we've all come out of the regulatory license Raj, so you're looking at far freer, liberalized environment with which industries can grow, and governments after all will have to create the facilitation for it. And I think the latest announcement in the budget and through the Prime Minister in the Independence Day speech of last year, that there shall be a master plan, a national master plan in the name of Gati Shakti, which will actually focus to get coherence in the narrative of all the investments being made for various different infrastructure creation. And unless the coherence is brought about in letter and spirit, the optimal utilization is never going to happen. And therefore, it is imperative here for us to understand what kind of resources that we are talking about. National infrastructure pipeline projects are worth over 1,15,000 crores. And this is being envisaged under the Industrial Corridor Development Program. So that's a big amount which is put into this kitty. The other amount which is also worth considering here so that we understand the importance of optimal utilization. I'm playing on that word. It is important for every rupee to realize maximum value. As a part of the central government's announcement for infrastructure expenditure this year, we've also said that 1 lakh crore in the 22-23 budgets will go to the states for 50 years interest-free, and essentially out of that, 5,000 crores has been earmarked purely for Gati Shakti related investments in the states. This was earlier last year 15,000 crores, which was originally 10,000 crores, was increased within that financial year to an amount of 15,000 crores. And we saw that in that year, 2021-22, the states showed a good appetite to absorb that amount. And that is the reason why we were encouraged to bring in 1 lakh crore this time. Going back to talking about what was 3 to 4 states becoming now 18 states, I also remember it was just Dholera and Shendra Bitkin when I was in the Commerce Ministry. But now I'm glad to say, under the leadership of Minister Piyush Goyal ji and Som Prakash ji, who's not here, and being guided also by Anurag Jain, the Secretary, this has now become 32 nodes in about 11 industrial corridors. So this is a rapid scaling up, spreading over so many different states, and as a result, there should be a greater cumulative benefit that we can derive out of it. I actually, with due consideration for the difficulties which states undergo, I request and appeal to all the Honorable Chief Ministers and the ministers who are present here to take up the land-related issues and sort them out in a time-bound manner so that the scale and the speed with which the entire industrial corridor projects moving, we should be able to benefit every state and not be held back because of any land acquisition related problems. I'll also appreciate and put on record the out-of-the-box way in which many of the states have thought about newer ways in which we can expand on the industrial corridor. Very good suggestions have come from states. I really appreciate and commend their approach in this matter. Whilst we have heard all the states, we have heard the ministry talking about it. I'd like to, because it's a monitoring, apex monitoring meeting that is happening, the authority, the monitoring authority is the one which is reviewing the progress. I wish to come up with 7 action points. Those points which I think if all of us focus on, we'll be able to add more substance to the work that we're doing. We'll probably tie up on the loose ends, and we'll also absorb the suggestions given by the states and be able to set a path for ourselves. And even before I go into the action points, I'd like to say that although we are doing the first apex monitoring meeting today with a long overdue list before us, we couldn't meet earlier, we shouldn't allow this delay. And therefore, I would suggest to Minister Piyush Goyal that the next meeting be held in sometime before the middle of November. And I have chosen November not out of the cuff, but I will explain as I go down during the action points being said. The first one, of course, is the action point on where states feel bringing in the private parties are becoming a bit more cumbersome. I would suggest that both the NICDC authority and the states will have to work together, like the way we do for investment summits, road shows, or special invitation to private parties to come. It might help if NICDC, together with the respective states, hold some gathering focusing on that state's corridor-related issues and bring the private parties to come in. So, whilst the state should speed up on the land and give that comfort to the private parties should be on a particular roadshow kind of a mindset, not really get out of the state, but be in your state, get people to come and talk to each other. The state, the government with the private parties and the private parties with the state about the difficulties as to why it's not speeding up faster. That could be one action point, and before November, particular states which will take keen interest, I would suggest the NICDC work with them. And the second one among the action points, I heard the Honorable Chief Minister of Haryana say that land has been acquired and for an inland container depot which can be built somewhere close to Ambala Yamuna Nagar, which will make a very big difference to the Amritsar-Kolkata corridor. It might be useful for the NICDC authorities to go check up with the Haryana authorities, also visit the site, see if there's any reason for us to speed it up, and tell us if there's any need for further support. If the state government has already acquired the land and is ready for an inland container depot, is there anything that we need to think about further waiting for something else, or should we go and upfront see what can be done about it? So that's the second action point I would suggest. The third one would be, Uttarakhand's Honorable Chief Minister mentioned that industrial areas, and fairly all of us are familiar with Rudrapur, Udham Singh Nagar, all of which are very well developed industrial hubs. But he also mentioned that although it is part of the Amritsar-Kolkata corridor, there doesn't seem to be that kind of a momentum coming from him, which is what he voiced in his own way. I would think a quick report on what actually is that leg of the corridor doing, Amritsar to Kolkata, particularly the Uttarakhand stretch. It could help us to get a picture. So if that can be taken up. Then comes the question, the fourth point I think is, if Minister Industry from Bihar said that Kushinagar Airport, given also the consciousness that Bihar actually supplies a lot of skilled workers in most of the textile hubs, he took the name of Tirupur and many other places, and also said Mitra, which is the mega industrial park for the technical textiles and for apparels. If there can be some possibility of understanding if that is actually workable, a suggestion. Kushinagar giving you the airport comfort, Bihar giving you the land comfort, Bihar also giving you the textile skilled workers support. Is there a chance for a Mitra to be located there? Although the minister constantly referred to only garments, industrial textiles and apparels are the only ones which are covered under the Mitra. But never mind, it might be worthwhile to study if there's a feasibility coming up there. And I'm glad to hear from the minister about the Gaya forest land related issues which he's sorting out. I then go to the next point which I want to specify, and I did sort of have a quick word with Minister Piyush Goyal as we started earlier. For some reason, and I got the explanation that it is because of time constraints, the three corridors, all coming from the south, Visakhapatnam, Chennai, Bangalore, Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, I think, have not been dealt with in an elaborate fashion. I can understand that. But the Chief Minister of Karnataka and somewhat even Maharashtra, when speaking, also spoke about the nodes linked to those corridors, about which we have not heard much. And also because those corridors also link up with the seaports, whether it is Krishnapatnam, whether it's Visakhapatnam, whether it is Chennai and Ennore, which is a newer port. There are a lot of node-related issues which I would like to understand. And even more, the industry minister from Andhra Pradesh spoke about the Kopparthi and Kadapa nodes, even as we listed Krishnapatnam in a way. So I would suggest that the Minister Industries, Shri Piyush Goyal ji, do a specific separate assessment of the three, Visakhapatnam, Chennai, Bengaluru, where again Tumkur is a node about which the Chief Minister spoke also, and the corridor coming from Bengaluru towards Mumbai. So it might be interesting. Dighi is also the port there, about which the DMIC will have to be worried about which the Honorable Chief Minister Maharashtra spoke. So a special review be done for the three southern linked corridors and their nodes as another action point which I would suggest. I move on to the next action point where I suggest, and I would like Minister Industry also to look at the purpose with which I'm saying this. Niti Aayog should undertake a quick study, because now I see a lot of activities which are happening, all of which will have to come under the umbrella of Gati Shakti. Industrial corridors are being talked about, rightly, because we are reviewing the NICDC. Freight corridors are also happening all over the country. Defense corridors are also happening, and good success is seen in UP of the defense corridor. UP also spoke, Honorable Minister Nandgopal Gupta ji also spoke about expressways now becoming the signature of UP. 3 major expressways all announced within the last few years. Then you have the earlier legacy industrial corridors, National Industrial Manufacturing Zones, NIMZs, languishing in different parts of the country with no connection whatsoever through the hinterland. Then you also have the recent announcements of PLI-based, yes, there are some investments happening in some parts, but they are major. You also have the medical and pharma hubs coming over. Then the logistics parks, which have already started taking up their role. I would like the Niti Aayog, very quickly, Dr. Berry, if you can please lead from the front on it, to before the end of October, which means I'm just giving you strictly 90 days, to map all this out. Map all this out for us, the industrial freight defense expressway corridors, the former National Industrial Manufacturing Zone, the Mitra parks, logistic parks, medical and pharma hubs, and the PLI. Map it all up and tell us where you see a possibility for greater bringing under the Gati Shakti, PM Gati Shakti. Because even now, as we speak about greater bringing under the umbrella of Gati Shakti, I find many of them still lying loose and connected. With you mapping it up, we probably will get a better idea of how they can all come into this scheme of things. The last one which I like, I saw the shipping secretary somewhere as a part of the meeting. I can't see him now, but he was there earlier.
I'm there, ma'am.
Oh yeah, thank you. I understand Minister Sarvanan Sonowal is with the presidential candidate somewhere in the Northeast. So I'd like to convey to you, please list out all the ports, the seaports, which have got some linkage to any one of these corridors. I start with Dighi. The Chief Minister Maharashtra is here. He also mentioned about it. And I remember the initial days of Dighi when I was in commerce. That's a very important step in the final completion of the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor. Dighi also should be as progressed in work as much as the DMIC itself. So, Shipping Secretary, please inform your minister. I'll talk to Sarvanan Sonowal ji myself. I want all those ports which have anything to do with any of these corridors. I took the name of Dighi, linking it with DMSC. I'll take the name of Visakhapatnam for the Visakhapatnam-Chennai corridor. I'll take the name of Chennai and Ennore ports, which are also on an expansion mode in the Delhi-Bangalore corridor. So you have, and also the Kolkata, Amritsar has the Kolkata port. So I would like you to look at every seaport which has a link to all these corridors and give us a report on whether the linkages are happening or are they in a silo themselves without much linkage to the neighboring corridor. It might help us to have a meaningful, I would think, assessment or a monitoring. So with these 7 action points, I suggest to the NICDC that sometime in the middle of November, with Niti Aayog's report in our hand, with the shipping ministry telling us that the ports, seaports, all of which are connected to one or the other corridor, are also getting linked up, and with the respective new suggestions which have come from either ministers or the chief ministers, there will be greater coherence and absorption of the suggestions which have come into the whole scheme of things for the NICDC corridor, expressway, and also the freight corridors together with the defense corridor, all of which are attracting huge investments to have greater meaning and purpose. So I thank every one of the participants who have come here today, contributed their bit. Yes, we are holding the first Apex monitoring a bit late, but I hope we'll start with greater momentum and move towards greater progress. So thank you very much for today's meeting.